Okay, here we have game 3 of the Sigma 18 tournament. I'm playing white in this position. I have won my second game, and there's about 30 players in this tournament, so you just divide by 2 every round to see how many people win. So you have around 15 winning the first round, then after the second round, so you have 7 winning the second round, round 7 or 8. So 7 or 8 players left that are on top of leaderboard. You just keep dividing by 2. It's going to be 4 players after round 3, 2 players after round 4. So the 2 players after round 4 would compete with each other for first. And here I have white against Lego Buddha. And we have d4. And I played the Trompovsky with bishop g5. I've never played this in a tournament before, but I have recently studied up on this. And this sometimes can be a solid or aggressive opening, depending on what black plays, but usually black plays passively with these moves, and you just have some pressure on with the bishop. Now g6, I take and double the pawns and play solidly. This is all mainline variation. And then we have knight c6, intending to go to e7 and overprotecting d5. This is a common maneuver. Otherwise, you'd have knight here, and the thing is, it disconnects the queen from the pawn. So that's why you want to maneuver your knight around like this. So you have something like this. What is this? Why? Okay, it's an analysis mode where it's sort of like white, and how it just does that. But what if I just refresh and then go like this, and then I show you guys the position, and we have knight c6 for me. So now, even though I'm blocking my c pawn, I'm planning to advance it later. I don't want to advance it right away. I want to maneuver this knight to c5 and then advance it, because the reason is, with c5 you could have something like takes, and then after takes, I'm going to have to spend some time recapturing, and you could have something like bishop e6. And even after like knight d2, again, bishop e6. And I fear this is going to be protected. And maybe you might see something like this, where now the bishop will open up. So I want to prepare it with rook here. And again, we see that knight maneuver to d7. Bishop f5, knight f5. No way he's playing g5, because now I can get my knight there, gain a tempo on the bishop. This bishop moves back. f6 is very weak. Or this bishop moves back here probably. We have c6, solidifying the pawn structure. Okay. And now black has built up a pawn structure like this. He doesn't want to break it. So I don't think b6 is coming in. If it is, well, I'll still play c5. And maybe I'll play b3, bring my knight back, and then prepare c5. And now if b6 comes, well, I have knight d3. I can always retreat my knight if I want, and this is a weakening move for black. He doesn't want to play b6 and weaken the light squares. We have c4, and again, rotating the knight to d6. Rook develops. Now I play a4. The idea is to go a5, a6, and then weaken c6, or if he takes, isolate the a pawns and c pawns, and he would have a very bad pawn structure. This is a common tactic to just march your a pawn down the board, combine with your bishop with heavy queenside pressure, and then the rook and also the knight. I mean, my rook is lined up with his queen, and so he moves his queen out of the way. I play a5, and if we have something like b6, I mean, I could just take, retreat. These 2 pawns are under attack, and I'm gonna take one of them. So we don't have b6, but we rather have here. And again, I'm just going to continue. I don't care if he trades pieces, because again, the pawn structure is very weak and actually take. And now look at these horrible pawns. They're isolated and weak. Queen c2, inducing a queen trade. And I have protected this pawn, but I'm targeting 2 weaknesses. So the thing is, this is technically a weakness. It's isolated. Can't protect it with a pawn, but I can easily target these 2 just as much as he can target this one. And if I am able to get 1, 2 for this, I'm going to be up one connected pass pawn. And this f pawn, this pawn which has moved from the e to f file, plays a critical role. Now the d file is completely under my control. And now rook a6, preventing the pawn from ever going forward and putting pressure on the c pawn. We have rook c7, knight d3, controlling the c5 advance. Bishop c7, king f1, getting my queen involved. We have king g7. Now I anticipated something like this, where after takes, something like b4, where you cannot take. You're going to see something like, not to d6, but maybe here, and then something like this, where again, even though you might be winning, or maybe not even that, maybe you can actually just take, and win a pawn, but you might see check here, and then something like this, where he got his rook behind the pawn, so it's going to be very hard for me to advance, but I'll probably actually get this here. I think the best thing to do is advance, and then get it to b6, but not to b7. Keep this rook patrolling that file, and work against this pawn. So I think he would have been able to maintain the draw with c5, but the engine actually says something different, and I'll show you later why. But now I'm like, you know what? Let's not let him play c5. And my pawn structure is just solved. The d pawn is really important here. I cannot trade that d pawn for the c pawn. My d pawn is so much stronger. It's a connected pass pawn if this pawn is gone. And I just advance my king. He advances his. I pressure the pawn, get my king to c5, and look at this. I don't want him to do anything on the king side. So we have rook here. I protect the pawn, protect it, move it back, and look at this. He's weakened these pawns. Now my rook has free reign. We have rook blocking, but I win a pawn now. And now this pawn is very weak. I win another pawn. I win another pawn. Notice how I make sure that I get the pawn to e4, because d5 he can just take, and he's threatening to fix his pawn structure a little bit. So those f pawns are very weak. He's not going to come around, and it's going to take him like 5 moves to do that. And he doesn't want d5 to come with check. So now d5, he can take. But even if it came with check, he would still be able to take it. No, actually no, the thing is he doesn't want it to come with check, because if he takes, I take the rook. And if I take now, he can recapture. So in this position, I play here. You moved your king to d6. What about your f pawn? It's now pinned. Only moves are this. We have that, and again, he cannot take because I take. And now I take the h pawn. And after some moves, I just advance my pawns, get his pawns, and just cut off the king and checkmate laterally. Or no, not laterally, but vertically. And that is game 3 of the Sigma tournament for me so far. So I have 3 wins, and we'll see you in round 4 analysis.